Uh, we should be live right now. Hello.
Excellent.
And welcome to everybody. And everybody who's rewatching afterwards, yo, what's up? I hope you can make it next time. Please hop in the chat. If anybody's watching throughout the whole video, hop into the chat, talk to us, make fun of my perm that I just got. And we want to make this dynamic and interactive. And if it's after the fact, same thing, okay? So I'm going to hand it off to Mags. Thank you guys for showing up. We are live on YouTube. Confirm that. Sometimes we're not live on both. And take it away, Mags.
Awesome. Here we go. Well, so we are so used to the mantra, Bitcoin fixes everything. But sometimes I think we kind of forget to take a step back and ask ourselves, is it really true? Today, we're going to tackle this controversial idea with real stories from Venezuela, from Latin America, and other parts of the world. Today, we have a very special guest, Mauricio from Ledn, and we also have Joaquin, Dave, and myself from MetaMesh. And again, to our audience, please feel free to post comments, questions. We really want to have kind of an interactive, casual vibe. So to set the scene, I think, one of the bigger problems that Bitcoin solves is protecting assets from being seized or from being stolen. So we've seen worldwide people in power, steal from others. And it's not just through quantitative easing and the Cantillon effect where, the recipients closest to the money printer benefit. We're talking about seizures of land and personal assets like gold, art. So I kind of want to kick off this conversation with us. Do you guys have any personal stories about government in power or about governments or people in power seizing assets? And I'm going to throw it out to our wonderful guest.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. Always a pleasure to talk about Bitcoin and obviously all the things that it does fix and perhaps the things that it can't fix. But there are definitely precedents for governments confiscating assets, Venezuela and recently in Argentina. So I think the most common way in which they do this, and I guess the one that most people may be familiar with, is a process called expropriation. And what expropriation means is that the government says that they are the only, or they feel entitled to own a corporation, a piece of land, a building, whatever it may be that the case that they feel like they want to expropriate or take ownership of from the private sector. And what it is, basically, it's a forced sale. Essentially, the government exercises its law. It's the fact that it controls the rule of law and says that it will purchase said asset from whoever the owner is because it is in its capacity to do so. And it will pretty much force the sale price. It's in some ways, it's tried to be masqueraded as market price. But most times when the government is expropriating something, there is no free market. So there is no real market to determine the price of this because nobody wants to buy something the government is expropriating. And so it's essentially like a robbery, really, said differently, for which sometimes you can get a token amount. And in Venezuela, in fact, the most prominent case of this, and perhaps we can add this to the show notes, but if you actually just Google Chavez expropriation, he would go on press conferences, like countrywide conferences, walking by the streets and pointing at buildings saying, what's that building? And he would ask his supervisor, and the guy would say, oh, just Google it. Go to YouTube and just Google Chavez expropriation. And you'll see him walking around, and he goes, well, that building, that's actually where Simon Bolivar's uncle grew up. What's there today? And that one, actually. Hold on. Chavez on the fanatics over farms. Perhaps just Google expropriación, like with a C instead of yeah, and then you'll see him. There it is, that one.
So like, this is mine. I want this.
Yeah, he basically says, oh, Simon Bolivar actually grew up in that building. What's there today? And the guy goes, oh, it's a shopping mall. And he goes, expropriate it. And he goes, "What's there?" And he goes, "Well, that's where Chimo Bolivar's aunt grew up." And he goes, "What's there today?" It's like some office buildings expropriated. And basically, he would go on and on TV, basically showing how he would just take over private properties at literally like this.
That can't make him popular.
It can because this is what happens when you expropriate something. You could turn the volume up anyway. I don't know if this is actually the live view. It seems like a news report.
Yeah, we'll see.
But in essence,
taking people out.
Why does this work, Mags? And why does this continue to work, particularly in socialist governments?
Yeah.
This works because this works because of math. It's simple mathematics.
Okay.
You go to a building.
Yeah.
Right. A building has 200 units. Right. Usually, it has two owners, one owner, a corporation, like a small group of owners at most. And in those 200 units, you can house 200 families, sometimes more.
Okay.
200 families times 4, that's 1,000 votes. That's 1,000 votes that you may not have had before versus 5 that you knew weren't voting for you because property owners don't necessarily vote for communism.
Got it.
So essentially, it becomes this massive fuel to gain popularity, because you can imagine how this formula can be wonderful to get elected, right? You would go to a corporation. The same thing happened to Petróleos de Venezuela, which is the state-owned oil company. And as soon as he came in, that was kind of the Venezuela's crown jewel. He wanted to have complete control over it. Over time, PDVSA had been staffed with, world-class executives and people that had morals and a backbone. And they weren't basically agreeing to all the things that he wanted to do because they thought it would decimate the company. Yeah. And after a bit of a, tug of war that was after he came into office, the state-owned company, all management decided that they were going to go on a full strike. Okay. And essentially, when this strike happened, this was the first massive strike against Chavez. And as a result of that, he actually took over the oil company in full, fired pretty much everybody, and just restaffed it with all of his friends. And so again, the company PDVSA wasn't necessarily an example of an expropriation because it was already state-owned, but it was an example of the government or the operator really removing all sort of meritocracy out of the corporation and just replacing it with its friends. And so really that's really the biggest examples. And I guess how this relates back to Bitcoin is that with limitations, right, you could argue that, if you are private about your Bitcoin and if you are a good user of your Bitcoin and you live in these environments, the government can't actually just, look at you and be like, oh, that's Mauricio. He has, 10 Bitcoin. Let's expropriate his Bitcoin, right? And even if they wanted to expropriate my Bitcoin, it would be very hard for them to do that, right? Yeah. Now, there are limits to that. And I want to be very clear about that.
Yeah. Hey, Mauricio, I have a quick question, though, about expropriation. So what you described there is mind-blowing. I can't believe, I knew that they privatized things and stole from everyone, but just walking around pointing
blatantly.
So it's crazy. But what about let's say in the United States when let's say, for example, in Chicago, they destroyed a whole town to expand the airport and bought out everybody's houses.
Yeah,
is that expropriation?
Yeah.
That's exactly an expropriation.
Okay.
It happens on highways. So highways are a common example. When you want to build a new highway, you actually have to go lot by lot, expropriating that piece of land from everybody. Wow. And then you have to get cable rights. So it's a big mess. Even antennas. So telecom companies, they actually buy or rent space from people. They don't expropriate it, but they do long-term leases. But these things have a raison d'etre or whatever. There's a reason why these things exist, and there's a good way to use them. There's just like everything, it can be misused.
Yeah. So a reason I asked Mauricio is because they're actually, we were talking beforehand about Mags and I and Joaquin about different types of seizures and theft. But I'd never thought of it this way, but I have a different story from my family. But my family used to have the oldest Italian restaurant in Chicago, and it is expropriated. I didn't know that was the word for it. It was on Lake Street, 20 East Lake Street, and we found out very recently that it was, we always use the word eminent domain, but it was not. It was expropriated, and there was some cronyism involved because it's Chicago, and basically they took we had closed the first restaurant during World War I because there wasn't enough people just to staff it, and that building is still there. It's a hair salon. It's near where Obama lives now. But like there's pictures on the internet of our restaurant, and people talking. No, it was like in the 90s, the Chicago Tribune did like a series of mini investigative pieces to find out our family recipes from that restaurant. So like, when I say we had a restaurant and it was expropriated, it did not. It survived, the Great Depression, World War II, and the economic downturn of the 70s. But when it was expropriated, my grandfather could not afford to reopen it because it's one thing to have a place that's paid off, that you pay the taxes, but you learn how to cook in that building and everything. But to go in the 70s during a downturn when like there wasn't like a day like nightlife like there is now, and there was in the 80s and in the 60s. So like he couldn't do it, and it's a shame. Like how would you ever know that it become you couldn't? You'd have to bat away people with a stick. But there's people talk about going to the symphony and going to our restaurant beforehand. And so when you said that, I was like, wait a second, that's expropriation. That's not even seizure. That's not illegal. It was legal. It was immoral. It was unethical. They fought it very hard, but they turned it into a parking lot, and then they turned it into a college. And I have walked by and spit on the college because it's permanent generational damage to like the story of our family. I mean, my uncle passed away, and he worked in restaurants his whole life, and he honestly the smartest man I ever met. Read a textbook and memorize it, but he didn't want to be a professor. He didn't want to do any of that. He wanted to be in the kitchen where he grew up. And I didn't realize that until he passed. Like, oh my God, like he was just waiting for his restaurant to come back. Aww. And so anyways, that's just blowing my mind that like this angle you're hitting on. Like I know about seizing assets from refugees and during wars and corruption, but you're right. I mean, this is powerful.
Dave, speaking of, I've got a family story too, and like this one, is personal to me. So, at the end of World War II, the borders of Poland were redrawn by the Allies, and Poland didn't have any, say in this. And but there was also like the Polish population was forcibly resettled, and so the village that my grandma lived in, was incorporated into what is now Ukraine. And she tells me these stories of like, this beautiful land, like such rich, fertile soil. Like, it was very, it was quite extensive land. She would tell me how she would like walk home, she would go to the garden and she'd get sunflowers, and she's like, they were like shields, like they were this big, and the seeds were like the size of her like thumb finger, and she has such amazing fond memories, but that like they took it away, and all she has is memories, and that's it. And it's like, what would the world be like if we still had this incredible land there?
Yeah, I want to ask you, Joaquin, but I'm not going to tell someone else's story. But I just found out, I mentioned this to you the other day. I won't mention the country, but a friend of mine is like, oh, David, we're rich. And I was like, I know your parents worked very hard when they came to this country. Oh, no, we have millions of dollars in land we can't access because if we sold it, they still own it. The government won't let them take the money out of the country. It's in Asia, so I don't want to tell someone else's story for them. But like, I mean, so even when you have something, when, like the threat of, in a democratic country, when there was a very heavy-handed dictator like president, right? They know that you can't get it. You can't get the money. You can't get the land. Maybe there's some local rents that go through it, but like if there was an emergency and they needed any of that money, they can't. They've been trying to figure out how to get it for years. They want to pass it on. They want to let it be used for something else. But yeah, Joaquin. So like you're from a place that has had its own share of troubles. Because I want to get back to more about Bitcoin.
Yeah, for sure.
But this is like right, Mags? Like this was such a great idea for a show because this is why we care about digital assets and Bitcoin, because throughout all of history, people in power have been using legitimate and illegitimate power to take advantage of those in need and vulnerable. And it happens every day. So your country, though, Joaquin, has had some interesting issues with money and finance. So where are you from? Tell people where you're from. I'm
from the lovely Argentina. And yes, I grew up by listening stories of my parents and families with all the devaluations that they suffer throughout their lives. And I'm talking about devaluation of the currency for, my father has about 5 or 6 devaluations and crisis period on his life. So I was at the beginning, I was like, oh no, okay, that's another story.
Hey, Joaquin, we want to, for people who don't know, what's a devaluation?
Okay, so just to give you an example, a devaluation is that when your local currency, let's say a peso, it's at certain period of time values, for example, $1. Okay, and then suddenly, because the government suddenly from one day to another, $1 is 4 pesos. Okay, so if you have 10 pesos, that now you can buy less dollars, right? So the devaluation is that the loss of the ability to buy stuff of the local currency. And that's happened many times in Argentina. We also, same as in Venezuela, we also had to adjust the bills. So for example, if we have 1,000 pesos, then they said, okay, now instead of 1,000, let's take out 3 zeros and say now it's 1 peso. You know
what? We had that in Poland too, Joaquin. When I was young, I remember holding like Polish currency, and it was like 5 million zloty. And I was like, wow, this looks like so much to a kid, right?
Yeah. So that was when you were a kid. So thanks for explaining what that meant. But you said that you thought it would never happen to you or while you were around?
No, I just I remember. And then the evaluation implies several different, secondary effects, and one of those is inflation, and that all the things, all the assets, toys and food start to increase the price in the local currency, not necessarily in dollars, but in local currency. So people who lives in the local economy, they have to, earn more and pay more for stuff. And I remember when I was about eight years old, I was working and helping my grandparents on bakery. So I clean stuff, I do some small work, and they pay me. They pay me 5 pesos. At that time, it was $5.
Wow.
I remember, just going and, save some money and go to the toy store to buy a Rambo,
Yeah.
pizza. And I said, okay, I'm going to buy this. Okay. And I was just trying the other day, I wanted to buy again and again. I wanted to take my money out because I go once a week, so something like that, and I saw the prices increasing on the toys, and I said, oh no, I have to buy more toys.
That's really interesting. Even as a child,
you
could see your economic power slipping from your hands.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I didn't understood at that time, but in 2001, we had a huge economic and political crisis in Argentina. From one day to another, one pesos, instead of be equivalent to $1, is just moved to 4 pesos to $1. Just to give you an idea, nowadays we have 140 pesos equivalent to $1. Okay, now 19 years later.
So I mean, Joaquin, it sounds like a very interesting year. So could you translate this for those of our audience that don't speak Spanish?
Yeah. So we had 5 presidents in 12 days. So
Look, when I first read this, I was like, oh, in 12 dias, that's 12 months. Wait, that's not 12 months. I was like, what?
Well, that sounds like 2020.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love the flames.
I just want to make, I mean, I said this devaluation of the currency, but the king of devaluation of the currency in Latin America is Venezuela. So I think Mauricio has a lot of stories to tell here.
Yeah. So bring it back. Yeah. You started talking about Bitcoin and some of the discussions we were having. Let's bring it back to you.
Yeah. I hear you have a pretty interesting relationship with expropriation and Bitcoin and devaluation. That's what the grapevine told me. What?
Yeah. Well, there's how do I just want to make sure that I frame this the right way. So Bitcoin is uncensorable in the digital realm. The users of Bitcoin are not in the digital realm. And so I find it fascinating because it's actually, this is not a dig on anybody, right? But it feels really great when you are sitting in North America, where you are abundantly protected by police and institutions and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And you're saying, I'm going to manage my own keys. I am my own self-sovereign bank. I have my privacy. No one knows what I have. No one knows what I do. I am just this ghost. I operate. I am everything and nothing. I don't exist, right? You have a passport. You have a passport.
Yeah.
You have a residence. You have a phone. You have a lease. You likely have a credit card. You exist. If they want to get you, they will get you. They are bigger, they are more, they are wealthier, and they are stronger. And the only reason you haven't really realized that is because they're not coming after you. So all I want to say is that when a government that has a democratic majority, and more so than a democratic majority, military backing, it's backed by its military, that government can do whatever it wants to its people. Because it not only controls the military, it controls the media, it controls the narrative, it controls everything. It controls who goes in and out of that country, right? If you're a Venezuelan person and somebody finds out that you have some sort of Bitcoin, or you have miners, or you have something, you're a target. Doesn't matter how many onions you use, doesn't matter how many wasabis you use, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. You are a person in a failed state. They will get you, right? And so there are limits to what Bitcoin can and cannot fix. Yes, it can fix your portfolio. Yes, it can fix your time preferences. Yes, it can probably give you an economic boost or an economic lifeline. But ultimately, it won't fix the problems as to why you got inflation in the first place, which is you have an incompetent group of people that are managing the government, and that the government and basically everyone in that country has allowed society to get to a place where it's just corrupted every single bone of the system, right? So you can airdrop Bitcoin to every Venezuelan tomorrow. It won't solve anything. And so I guess all I'm trying to say is that the real problems, technology is not going to solve human problems. Okay, it helps, but humans, we have to solve our own problems by dealing with other humans. You can't abstract humanity out of economics. Economics are just people interacting with other people. And so ultimately, there is a level of things that have to get fixed because they are behaviors and cultural things that people do. right? Like you can, like I said, you can airdrop people to a lot of people. Like you can airdrop Bitcoin to a lot of people. It won't change their behavior necessarily, because
Yeah. Mauricio, it's just, we don't need to delve into it, but Mags and I, while we were just kind of thinking about this yesterday, we stumbled upon this, about, asset seizure and stuff. We found out, and this is from a couple of years ago, but we didn't know that even when you, when you escape from like a dangerous situation in like a war zone, that when you get to like Europe and other safe places, they, like you said, this is the physical world. They rob you of, like, they'll pass laws to rob you to compensate them back. So your physical vulnerability as a human being is just, like you said, it's inexorable from existence. I mean, you can have whatever identity or Bitcoin or private key you have, they can take everything. Like you said, but I was blown away that this is, like, Denmark passed this law, and I didn't follow up enough to know what happened with it. But I mean, like, I knew that along the way people would steal from you, but I never knew. But like that, it's like it would be official policy, and they're talking about it like, it's the thing that happens, like, because you're vulnerable. You're vulnerable even to the people you trust, and the physical world, it will never go away.
I actually feel a little bit maybe privileged as a refugee. We escaped Poland during communist rule, and my parents were at the border. They had guns. They weren't sure they were going to let us out, and we got really lucky because they wouldn't let the whole family leave. But there was a woman there, and she was compassionate, and she's like, basically, like, she opened up all the luggage, and she's like, are you going to do some sales? And then she opens it up, and she's like, it looks like baby clothes, like I was a baby, and she's like, you're not coming back, are you? And my dad's like, no. And then, but she let them go. But we went to Germany eventually, and we applied to refugee status, but they actually didn't take any of our items. Not that we had much. We had almost nothing, right?
But I mean, how lucky.
That kind of a situation. Imagine, like, you come to this new country, and they're like, well, actually, we're going to steal whatever money that you have. We'll leave your wedding rings because they have sentimental value. Like,
But I just to not end this Venezuela, the things I think I very much covered a lot of the things that Bitcoin can't necessarily fix right away. That's not to say that Bitcoin isn't helping people in Venezuela. There are things that Bitcoin can facilitate that did not exist. So, for example, very much the case, even though on a much smaller scale, that refugees trying to leave Venezuela on foot have to inevitably cross the border. The border is controlled by thugs or bad people. And when they see that you have dollars, gold, or any visible type of asset, they will take it. And some people, again, the overlapping Venn diagrams are not necessarily, one in the same. But there are people in these situations that say, okay, well, if I am going to take $3,000, which is my net worth, I'm not going to take $100 bills. I may just write these 12 password phrases in this piece of paper. And many militaries still, many kind of people that are in the front lines, they don't really know what those 12 words are. He can basically, give those 12 words to his other relative across the border so that he doesn't even have to carry it with him. So anecdotally, there are I know of essentially clients of ours that live in the bordering towns to Venezuela. So a big city is Cucuta. So Cucuta is where this Richard Branson concert was held. I don't know if you remember all that stuff. But Cucuta is essentially one of the main bridges, right? And to kind of cross between Colombia and Venezuela. And there are Bitcoin ATMs now on the Colombian side of the Cucuta border. And people actually go in and across the border, withdraw pesos from their ATMs by selling Bitcoin to the ATMs, do their shopping, right? And then come back with their goods. And so this is a this is known, this is widely known that this is a big trade. And in fact, if you pull up the local Bitcoin numbers for both for Colombia and Venezuela, what you'll see is a very interesting phenomenon, which is that there is a surplus demand to purchase Bitcoin in Venezuela, understandably, because people want to protect themselves from inflation. And because more people are buying Bitcoin in Venezuela than selling, that creates an artificially high price for Bitcoin in Venezuela in bolívares, right? Relative to the dollar price in every other country, right? Flip side of that trade is where are those Bitcoins going? So those Bitcoins are actually getting spent in Colombia. So these are people that are buying Bitcoin in Venezuela, crossing the border, selling it for pesos to get goods, and then crossing back, right? So what this creates is a disproportionate sale pressure on the Colombian peso to Bitcoin pair, right? And so what you'll see is that Venezuela Bitcoin trades at a premium and Colombian Bitcoin trades at a discount, right?
Yeah. It's almost like sending a Mauricio. It's like almost like sending a remittance to yourself, right?
100%.
Yeah, it's interesting.
There are companies that are working on basically flipping the flow back because that dislocation allows for very good rates, right? For people that want to send pesos to bolívares. So there are companies that are working around that.
Hey, Mauricio, for somebody, I think I realized that it might not be obvious. For somebody who may not know, why would they do that? Why would they send money to themselves and come back? Like, what's the risk? Because so that it doesn't, the main risk of leaving the country for good, but like just going to shop for the day. Why would you do that extra transfer?
Yes. So two things can be done, right? Like this allows you to do two things. When your money is in Bitcoin, right? You can send it to Colombia like that. Like you could just call up your friend that's in Colombia if you can make the trip, and you'll send to him. He'll go to the ATM and he'll send you the goods. So optionality is number one. The second one is the risk of actually crossing the border with those goods, right? So when you are crossing, when you're crossing the border with bolívares, with dollar bills, which are very conspicuous, and and you are a person that is known to perhaps cross and you have a few stamps on your passport, they probably figure out that you're going shopping. So they'll start digging around for your money, right? And if they find it, they can take it, right? Because they do. And so people essentially are like, okay, well, you can take my money once, but you're not going to take my money twice. And so basically you show up and they're like, where's the money? Where's the money? And you're like, I don't have money. You want to take me to jail? Take me to jail. And they don't want to take me to jail because that's work. They just want money. Like they don't want to work. Work would be like they have to write a case. Like why am I putting this guy in? Explain to his boss. And like, oh my god, too much.
Hey Meg, what did NVK say last week about? Was it like a fake wallet? Like what do people do for pickpockets? What do they call it? The decoy wallet?
Oh yeah, they have decoy wallet.
A decoy bribe wallet, right? Like I only got a couple bucks. So here you go, take it.
Yeah, and so again, those types of things, you have to have a lot of balls to pull that off. Okay, and like I've been robbed at gunpoint several times. And I can recall the experiences very well every single time, and not once did it ever cross my mind not to do absolutely everything they said or give them absolutely everything they asked for. Okay. The risk of not is just way too high. And everybody likes to think that when you're in this situation, you're going to be actually like, dealing with a rational human. And you're like, oh no, wait, Mr. Robert, like, let me just get you all my stuff. And like, do you really want to rob me, Mr. Robert? It's like, that's not how it goes. Okay, like you're getting held at gunpoint by a guy that's probably on drugs. Yeah. Most of the robberies that are like this, even this small stuff, is not previously planned, so they are not necessarily like the most coordinated or experienced. And it depends because violence can get out of hand. Like in Venezuela, people got shot for shoes, all the time. And so this thought of, I'm going to be smarter than the person that might be willing to take my life, and I'm going to be, prepared to defend my Bitcoin with my life, is just, I think it's a great thought, but not a lot of people expect that they might actually have to live through it, and actually pull the trigger on that.
So it's interesting. So, on the one hand, why don't we just talk about why people say Bitcoin solves everything? Because what you did there is described a situation where it solves something actually. but not as completely or safely as people would say. But like Joaquin, what have you heard people say about like why Bitcoin fixes everything? Like, what do people think it could do, or what do they always say? Because we're finding out that
it doesn't solve everything.
It doesn't solve everything.
Yeah,
but it could solve more than sometimes you think.
I think it's important. I agree with what Mauricio said about that. It doesn't solve anything. I mean, it doesn't solve anything. I mean, everything. Sorry, yes. It solves some stuff, but besides that, the Bitcoin solves some stuff. I think that there is that human component that people need and want to learn how to use the tool in their advantages, because I talk with many people and they don't want to switch, they don't want to change, so there is or they don't want to see this option. I think Bitcoin is a good tool as an option, so we as humans, we have an option to manage value. Okay, so I think it's important for people to understand that this is that. And if you don't want to change, it's fine. It's your problem. It's your decision. But the good thing for me, at least as a communicator on this space, is, hey, I want to show you that these tools exist. And I'm going to support you and help you if you want to use these options. I'm not going to just push you buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin. No. I just want to, make you conscious that these tools exist. So when you want to make that change, and I'm going to have the right fundamentals to say, these tools are really helpful for some specific uses. You want to change. So I think that besides exchange value is a very important feature and can be used for many potential use cases, not for everything. But I think that being able to exchange value in a decentralized way or in a more decentralized way will generate and is generating a new generation of tools that can be built based on that. But that is not everything, definitely.
Yeah. Actually, I had this queued up and I forgot. And when you were talking about Mauricio, about this fanciful notion, we didn't know you were going to say that, but we're not calling out this fine gentleman. But it's a common mindset. He says, I just explained to someone last night that I was willing to die for three things: my family, defending my country, and the Bitcoin cause. So not even just his Bitcoin, like the cause.
Listen, again, I want to go back to the things that Bitcoin does fix, because evidently everyone here in this group has invested our careers and in my case, my livelihood into Bitcoin, because I believe in Bitcoin and I believe that it can fix many things. I also think it's the greatest collateral asset to be created, and so I want to take a second to really, voice the things I feel Bitcoin can fix and is fixing.
Please.
So one of them is the notion of if you've lived or grown up in a country that was attacked by inflation or affected by inflation, Joaquin, you'll know this. The very first thing the government does when they see that their people understand what's happening and understand that they're basically just printing money to fund their own political agenda, the people, the first thing they do is they say, screw you guys, I'm going to get rid of this fiat that you guys are printing hand over fist, and I'm going to buy myself some dollars, right? And that works for the first little bit, right? Then the price of dollars goes supersonic, right? And then what that happens is then the price of goods start going supersonic, right? And so what happens is the prices of food and very basic stuff starts going up, and everybody gets mad at the government, right? And so when everybody gets mad at the government, they're like, Mr. Government, the prices of food are going up. What are you doing? And they're like, we're trying to help you, bro. we're just printing money to give you on these social programs. But these crooked empresarios, these capitalist business people, they keep increasing the prices. So, I can actually produce beef for less than this beef company. So should I expropriate it or what? And everyone's like, expropriate. And so it's a numbers game. And so then what these guys do is, prices of food are going up because these disgusting capitalist companies are jacking up the prices of their goods, and they're purchasing dollars. They're speculating with their dollars so that you can't purchase your food because they know that the project that we have is going to take money from them and give it to you. And so it's really them. So just give us more votes to keep taking things away from them so that we can give them back to you, right? So that works really well when you can control the narrative and say that, the US dollar, the US is an empire. The US is this evil empire that's just out to get you and just out to get your people and your government from fixing its problems, right? Now, very shortly after, the next thing that they do is they say dollars are illegal. If you purchase dollars, you will go to jail. We are the only person that can sell you dollars. And of course, people don't stop trading dollars. The market continues, but then it gets dubbed the black market, right? But it's actually the market. The black market is the one they have.
So Mauricio, this guy on the screen I have, is that what he's doing?
He's an illegal dolero, yeah. So
okay, yeah. See, like I was going just for the visual. I didn't know what he was doing. I thought
so in Venezuela,
yeah.
So in Venezuela, it's been illegal for the longest time. And then when oil crashed and they could no longer manipulate it, they made it legal because they had to. The government was forced to make it legal.
Okay.
And now, what does Bitcoin do in this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful dynamic? It says, okay, you don't want me to buy dollars? Sure. You can monitor bills pretty easily. You can probably, if you get an agreement, you can probably monitor bank accounts too. Good luck trying to monitor my Bitcoin. Good luck trying to monitor me trying to pay cash to an individual through a P2P exchange, getting some Bitcoin and protecting my assets and getting them out of this country, right? And they can say, oh, well, let's try to constrict the flow of dollars in the country. You can't. So there's a lot of things you can do around dollars legally that you can't do around Bitcoin. And so what Bitcoin is this door, to Joaquin's point, I see Bitcoin as an option. Bitcoin is a big, giant door to opt out of your financial system. Not your government, not your country, your financial system, right? And that'll give you a window of opportunity that you can then use to try to fix your government and to try to fix the other things that are broken, right?
How was the window created?
You just saw it before other people. So you just protected your wealth a little bit longer. You were able to stay on your own 2 feet a little bit longer. Perhaps even save, perhaps even it mooned on you, and you can now reinvest some of that into the project that you want to do to help.
So, Mauricio, my family actually, we are Irish, but we come from Zimbabwe. And of course, if we want to talk about hyperinflation, that is they're like the biggest case study, the wheelbarrows of money just to buy a loaf of bread. But what you said there really resonated with me because we were very lucky. Me, I was not born there. My mom was, but my grandparents took their children out because they saw the window. They saw the banks were getting assets were getting seized in Congo, and that you're like, oh, you could keep your money, but you can't take it out, or you can't turn it into pounds or dollars, and so they just saw the writing on the wall, and it broke their hearts. I mean, they did not want to leave. Their whole family was there. They made a life. My grandfather spoke. I don't remember which. I never got to ask which one it was, but he spoke African languages, and he learned Mancala decades before before it came to the United States because they loved it there. They just loved it there. But and mango tree in the backyard. But they just saw this is our window. If we don't leave now, we will lose everything. And everybody who did stay and didn't go to South Africa, the UK, or the US, they lost everything or they were murdered in the war. And the last group of them, again, I don't want to share other people's stories, even though it's my family. They had all their land seized, all their money seized by Mugabe and the government, and they, expropriation, right? And they walked out of the country. I mean, if they had Bitcoin, they could have sent something. They literally walked out and when they got out of the country, they called somebody. So people showed up with guns at their door. And so, I mean, it wouldn't have prevented them from losing their house. And maybe they couldn't have gotten all their money out, but like a plane ticket, like once they left, they couldn't, I think they could bring their wallets. That was about it. And their passports. Because again, it was a very coordinated, direct campaign to steal the land. And it caused the hyperinflation and the famines. I don't know if it was technically a famine, but they ran out of food because it was the #1 breadbasket in Africa. But when if you're gonna abuse someone, make them teach you how to farm first before you kick them out. Yeah. So it was just really, it was just so heartbreaking, and it destroyed the country. And they recovered. And I've met some of them. But yeah, I mean, they had to they were refugees with nothing. And again, the privilege to survive and to be able to call someone in the UK and stuff. And then years later, have enough wealth and privilege to get here. But, man, just how hard it would be to rebuild your whole life because you didn't see the window, or you saw the window and you couldn't get your money out because they couldn't even take their dog. They couldn't even literally, yeah.
It's really unfortunate, and these windows are happening as we speak. There are countries right now that are living through this window. Joaquin, I hate to say it, Argentina is one of them. People in Argentina,
I completely agree. No.
people in Argentina, the Venezuelan window has passed. I think it's very little that Venezuelans that haven't left at this point can do to really just leave now. There's very little to salvage at this point. Argentinians probably still have some to salvage, and so what Bitcoin does very well is that it effectively creates a permissionless financial system, completely parallel. Before Bitcoin, just to give you an example, if a person in Venezuela wanted to get a loan, the only credit institution they could go to was a Venezuelan bank.
Yeah.
No foreign bank would give you a loan backed by an asset in a jurisdiction that they don't work in, because that's how they operate, right? With Bitcoin, we at Ledn, which is one of the things that I love about this company, is that we can process loans to a person in Colombia or Venezuela at the same speed, at the same rates, at the same service quality that we do for Canadians. And that could not be done before Bitcoin. That was absolutely something that Bitcoin enabled on its own. It did not exist. Not only that, I mean, that's the loans, but you can also earn interest. There was no way in Venezuela, if they made dollars illegal, that you could bank dollars. And even when they were made legal, the very next day they could wake up and say, sorry guys, we just have to take these dollars, and now you get bolívares. And at the new value that we determined.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So what I'm hearing is what Bitcoin can do now is these bigger picture. I mean, economy of scale here. So somebody who has nothing, $100 is a big picture. Here it might not be in the United States. So take your money and save it so you can move it and protect it and use it when you need to. But it sounds like most people criticize Bitcoin because they wanted it to do all the small little stuff. I want to buy my can of Coke in Bitcoin, and it's not there yet. It won't. I think something will be, but
so you can't be everything for everybody. That's not just the problem with Bitcoin has. Everybody has that problem. You're not going to be liked by every single person. You have to take stances. You have to focus. You have to choose what you want to focus on. And every time you focus on something, there are trade-offs for something else, right? And so and I'm very skeptical of anyone that sells me a silver bullet solution for anything at no trade-offs. Very, very skeptical. And so with what Bitcoin has done very well, and again, this may take time, but to me, Bitcoin is a way to protect and move value around. Now, is it at the point where you can spend it easily? And with its marvelous investment qualities, would you even want to spend it? So those are different questions.
Yeah.
But I think what stands is this idea that, you know, people can have their value stored over a period of time without risk of that losing value potentially over time. So it's even dollars, for example, frankly, are designed to get printed even more. Yeah. So they're built to be devalued. So that was the primary savings vehicle for people globally. And so the fact that you can now just even upgrade this base layer vehicle is a huge benefit.
Yeah, I just learned that recently that, I mean, I knew that, you know, they shifted from the gold standard and everything, but like the reason they did it was so they could devalue the money. I didn't realize that. I thought they're like, oh, it's too cumbersome, it's expensive. No, it worked too well. And they didn't like that. They couldn't control it. And and then that's what, you know, I learned this, you know, being in this industry. But before that, I didn't know that fiat meant it had no value besides the trust. Because before that, because like technically a gold-backed dollar, if I'm correct, it would not have been a fiat currency because it's backed. I mean, it has some representation. It's not as you know. Again, the world could crumble around it, but there's something more than just trust. You can at least get something back from the government. You know, if you want your wheelbarrow of gold, you can get it. You could have, yeah.
Dave, I want to So we keep hearing about dollars, Mauricio, yes. Right? And, you know, people in Venezuela, Argentina, they're so used to, you know, dollars hold better value compared to, you know, the local currencies. And Bitcoin kind of maybe seems like this newer, different concept. So I'm just wondering, you know, as with this massive rise in stable coins, and you know, we always talk about Bitcoin fixes this or Bitcoin's the use case. Maybe even in your experience, like are stablecoins preferred? Like, do people prefer Bitcoin because, you know, it's the most secure network and it's uncensorable? Or I'm just really curious about your thoughts, because people are living in this, like, you know, this black market for dollars. How does that all fit in?
Yeah, it's a phenomenal question. So, you know, for those of you who know Ledn or have been familiar with the products, we actually launched a USDC stablecoin savings account. And that is, I am personally a big believer in stable coins. I think they're going to be huge engines in driving the adoption of Bitcoin. And the reason I say that is, so the world knows and loves dollars, right? Yeah. When you're going to a person in Argentina or Venezuela, and you say to them, listen, dude, prices are going up. You know, you can see that you're losing the value of your savings. I can show you a way to protect them. Yeah. And the way that they have historically protected them, the way they saw their parents protect them, the way they saw their uncles protect them, was buying dollars, right? Mm-hmm. If you are a merchant in these countries, your invoices are in dollars.
Yeah.
If you have a bank account in Wells Fargo or Bank of America, you've interacted with dollars.
Okay.
If you have traveled and you have gotten on a plane, you've been told you have to take dollars.
I even take dollars when I travel, like Europe or someplace.
Everywhere. It's the world currency. Like, seriously.
Yeah. As an American, I was a little hurt when the euro came around, because I'm like, what do you mean it has value? And I don't need to take dollars. Like, I was like, what are you talking about? We're supposed to be the best.
You know, like, stepping aside from the emotions behind that, because some people might feel a certain particular way over that. It's, if you remove the emotion over it, it's like, it makes sense. Like, the world will interact in one coin, and particularly the coin that has the most stable value, because it's just what allowed people to create those anchors of pricing and value over time.
So Mauricio, we all know what it means, and we're assuming, you know, our first wave of people listening are, you know, crypto enthusiasts, but you don't have to explain how it works. Nobody cares. I don't know. But like, what is a stable coin? Just why? Like, what does that mean? I mean, I don't.
Hilarious that I was actually explaining this to one of my good friends last night.
Yeah.
And okay. You're
it's crazy. It's crazy how the light bulb goes off. It's like there's a Bitcoin light bulb, and that one's like, it's a hard light bulb to get to, right? Like you have to explain to people, like, okay, like
middle
it's
light bulb.
and so and people have this like base knowledge of Bitcoin by now. So, I was telling my friend, he's like, I was telling him about it. He was asking us, it's like, oh, like, these looks like you guys are doing great. What is this new account? What is this USDC stuff? And I'm like, well, USDC is this dollar, really? It's a stable coin. And he says, what is that? Like, how do you mean they're dollars? And I'm like, well, so you take a dollar, like a real US dollar, you put it in a bank account at JP Morgan, and you get a token that says that you have a dollar in JP Morgan. And then you can give that token to someone else, and then that someone else can, if they want, go back to JP Morgan and get the dollar out. And so it's a
gold certificates.
So it's a token that represents a dollar that is backed 1-to-1 by a dollar, real dollar, sitting in an escrow account somewhere that can be redeemed for that dollar, right? When I explained this to him, and I said to him, and the beautiful and unique thing about this is that it's a dollar that is on digital rails like Bitcoin. So you can open an address, you can send it to me right now. You could have your cousin open an address in Singapore. You can send it to your cousin in Singapore. It'll be done in 1 second. It's not a wire transfer. It's not. You don't have to go to the bank. You don't have to get like 3 people to sign off on your transaction. And essentially, you can. And then not only that, you can access savings accounts, loans. You can pay people, and basically you can do a lot of other, and you can invest in other, assets if that's your cup of tea. So immediately he was like, "Wait, what? Like, what? Why haven't I like checked this out?" It's like, I have some dollars like earning 2% in some dumbass bank, and like why haven't I done this? Why haven't you told me about this yet?
I thought you were my friend.
And I'm like, dude, I'm telling you right now. It's so
my company is about that.
That should be a t-shirt. Don't put your dollars in a dumbass bank. Get a stable coin.
And so for him, and he's the guy who, if I had told him, buy 50 grand worth of Bitcoin, he would have been like, no, too volatile. I got burned in the 2017 run, like, blah, blah. Like, I think this is cool, but I just don't feel comfortable doing it.
Like, buy 50,000.
But if I said, hey, you can earn 10% on your dollars and you can withdraw them anytime, he was like,
what?
Can I just give you my checking account number right now, because I don't get even like 1% from my
I know.
bank.
0.1%.
They're all criminals here.
So that's why this thing is taking the world by storm, and that's, I think, the biggest drawback. There's 2 things happening. The stable coins are just going exponential. Like you can see it in the numbers, and you can see it in these conversations that like the conversation I was having with my friend. And we have a lot of those over the past week, like investors that just frankly didn't even know what USDC was. And then they were like, oh, wow. They're like, that sounds legit. And it can give me some much better opportunity. And I actually feel comfortable working with you guys more than my bank. I feel like I know you guys better than my bank. And so it's like,
it's all about trust in our industry, right?
Well, you have to earn it, right? Like people don't just give it to you.
I'm just going to give you all my info right now live on the internet. What?
Where are you getting the 10% returns from? Like the banks are offering tiny. And
so, okay, let's step back for a second, because I want to also make people understand that this isn't coming out of thin air, right? We are Bitcoin-backed products, or Bitcoin-backed loans. So we lend dollars to people that don't want to sell their Bitcoin. And our rate structure is 1% a month, 2% at mint. If you annualize that rate, that's 14%. So we could actually afford to pay the people that send USDC to our accounts. We can afford to pay them 10%. That's the main and first use case. But then the second piece to that is we work with Genesis, who is our institutional counterparty, and who we work with for all of our savings accounts. So every time we have Bitcoin come through or USDC come through, we essentially either lend it through our book, which is 2-to-1 backed by Bitcoin, or we send it to Genesis, who does the same. Okay. And so in both of those instances, we get paid in excess of 10, and we can sustain these rates, so much so that we're actually holding them to the end of the year, because the demand has been so strong on both the USDC and the Bitcoin side that it allows us to do that. And frankly, we felt this year has been unpredictable enough And so we just wanted to at least provide that if we could, which we could, and that's something that's done really well for us. Like people really seem to I don't want to say appreciated that, but they like it, and we see it in our numbers. So it's, again, these digital dollars do open doors to an entirely new financial system that did not exist 5 years ago. And now an entrepreneur sitting in Venezuela that perhaps is doing gig work for a developer and started earning Bitcoin can now all of a sudden start accessing savings accounts and loans if they don't want to sell it, and they can start being wise about their finances, even in these terrible environments. If you have if you have the will, you'll find the way now thanks to Bitcoin.
What are they getting a loan in? Like, is it their local currency?
It depends. So, for example, in places like Mexico, we send pesos.
Okay.
Places like Colombia, we send pesos. Places like Venezuela, most people want their funds dispersed in either stable coins or international banks. So banks that are not in Venezuela. So it varies depending on the market.
Okay.
But by and large, people get either stable coins or fiat, depending on their use.
Hey, Megs, we're hitting the hour mark, and we know that we won't say who. It's not me. Somebody's laptop might die, so we don't want to have them hop off. So we want to. I heard you had a question, and again, just to reground it, even if we've already asked it. Like, you had a question for us, Megs, that we each going to answer 1 or 2 sentences, right?
Oh yeah, no, I was just wondering, kind of like, we had this, thought-provoking, like really interesting conversation, and just kind of wanted to circle back, like on, back on like final thoughts, and like, does Bitcoin fix everything? Does it fix nothing? Like, what do we need to work on? And I, for me personally, because I've seen, asset seizure with my grandma, like it does personally affect people. This isn't, this is old. This isn't like a new issue. This has been happening for centuries. We need to, so I do see this need to keep working on solutions of Bitcoin, but like, my thinking based on what I recently heard from Mauricio is like, it's Bitcoin, but it's broader than that. We're creating this new financial system, and we're linking in, traditional currencies and ways of thinking if people are pricing things in USD, and we're connecting the system to kind of provide a more open financial world. So I think it's there's value in that, and maybe Bitcoin doesn't fix it all, but it definitely has those use cases that we talked about, and maybe a valuable one too is connecting it to kind of the legacy world, and maybe at some point we'll leave that behind. So, but Mauricio, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Kind of closing thoughts on like Bitcoin fixes everything mantra, and
I think so. What I do think it fixes, like I said previously, is it fixes this. Before Bitcoin, there was this idea that if a government wanted to completely isolate their population from the financial system, international financial system, they very well could, because when you block access to dollars, you block access to anything. So before Bitcoin, if my government decided, like it did, that dollars were illegal and that I couldn't bank dollars in my local banks, my only option was to fly to Florida to open a bank account and to basically do all these workarounds so that I could send every little dollar that I could get to a Florida bank account. And I could get shut down at any moment. Those were my options as a Venezuelan. Mm-hmm. The other one was buying gold and risking crossing the border with it and potentially getting shot.
Yeah, sorry.
That was before Bitcoin.
Yeah.
What Bitcoin does solve is financial inclusion, the option to include yourself in the global financial system. That's what I think it does better than anything I've ever seen as an asset in my lifetime. What it doesn't fix is the other types of rights and I want to say almost like human rights and liberties that you should enjoy, and I think those ultimately come from the way we organize ourselves as a society. Mm-hmm. And so that is not necessarily directly linked to money, and so while it may be a big piece of that, it's not everything. So again, just to close, I think what Bitcoin does is it gives everyone around the world the option to enter into a new financial system and to build on that new financial system to leave whatever environment you might be in for a better one.
Yeah.
What it doesn't really do is fix those crappy environments, right? Because if you think about it, it just gives people options, and that to me is incredible as it is.
I think Joaquin might have lagged out. I don't know. He's not.
So what about you, Dave?
Does it fix everything? That's gonna be a hard no for me. It's good to hear about. I'm trying to find a good layout. Oh, here he is. Welcome back.
I'm back. Sorry about
well,
storm out here. So
I
don't know what happened with the connection, but
yeah, I saw you froze. Yeah. So does Bitcoin fix everything? No. Do I want it to? Yes. Do I think something related to it will fix everything? Yes, but it'll cause more problems that we don't expect. but I really think that based on what I'm hearing here now, it sounds like Bitcoin may end up being more like, from this perspective at least, a reserve currency, and there's going to be other ways to. I mean, why can't I swipe my Visa and just use a USD coin? Like, come on, people. I mean, but anyways, Joaquin.
Yeah, Joaquin, we'd love to hear from you.
Does it fix everything?
I don't think so. I think that solve some fundamentals on how to move value around the world, and I think that enables new products, new solutions like Ledn and many others.
Yeah.
That will impact probably in the mid or long term, and in some more extreme situations like Venezuela in the short term, that now is helping people right now. But I think it's good to see that in that way. It's not only fixing some small time, but it's also enabling many stuff. And we are just the beginning, and we are just 12 years from Bitcoin white paper. So it's a long way to go.
Yeah. Max?
Yeah, no, thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts. Definitely check out Ledn. We'll have information about Mauricio and Ledn in the description below. If you really like this kind of conversation style hangout, please subscribe to the MetaMesh channel, or follow me on Twitter. I'm tweeting out whatever, the next hangout when that happens. We'd love to have Mauricio on again because he's got some really incredible stories about Venezuela and Bitcoin mining. So we'd love to have him on again, dive in more, about Latin America and Bitcoin use in there with our colleague Joaquin. So, yeah.
Sorry. Every time we have a guest, I have so many questions. I'm like, oh, I have to have them back. I have so many questions about ledgers and falsified ledgers and trusting banks that I didn't even think of before you were talking. Yes. So
we can do this anytime. It's a process.
Yeah, and
it's a never-ending process.
Let us know who we should have on too. If you think we should add somebody else that can really add to that conversation, we'd love to do it again.
And anybody who's watching later, please, we've had luck with people responding. We actually love when you interrupt us with comments, and we want to make it dynamic. And eventually, when we're really good at this, we're gonna let people kind of hop in for questions and stuff. But yeah, it's a chat. We love doing it and doing it live.
And if you think we should have somebody specifically on, let us know in the comments.
Yeah, please do. Awesome.
Thank you. Perfect. Bye,
Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.